The 7th generation of home video game consoles introduced many features that define how we play games today. Features we now take for granted. One thing that has kind of been left behind is console-specific controller gimmicks. Nintendo introduced the motion tracking Wiimote and balance board. Sony replicated the idea with their PlayStation Move controllers. And Microsoft opted to turn their players into the controllers, making them flail their bodies around in front of their now infamous Kinect camera. Sure, in 2026 you have your PlayStation VR 1 and 2. The DualShock and Xbox controllers offer different kinds of haptic feedback and vibration options. And Nintendo is still playing around in their own sandbox regardless of what the other kids are up to. But VR isn't exclusive to consoles. Haptic feedback has an arguably inconsequential impact on the overall gameplay experience, and the motion controls for the Nintendo Switch 2 is an impressive, albeit somewhat minor evolution of what came bundled with the Wii back in 2006. They also don't feel as integral as they did on the Wii. Today, you can play the latest Zelda like you're playing any modern game. But if you wanted to play the latest Zelda on the Wii back in the day, you had no other choice but to swing that Wiimote around like you did your imaginary lightsabers back during 2nd grade recess. The Wii is especially interesting to me. Not just because it was the 7th generation console to embrace motion controls right out of the gate, but because it had a significant library of horror games that found very different ways of utilizing those controls. If you have played just one big-budget video game in the past 15 years or so, chances are you will quickly learn how to play most, if not all, of the new ones, because the controls and individual buttons often work very much the same way. For younger generations, it might be difficult to imagine a time when that wasn't the case. For example, there's an often cited review of the original PlayStation game Alien Resurrection, which I myself have referenced before, where writer Stephen Garrett complains about how cumbersome it is to move with the left thumbstick and control the camera with the right one. A control scheme that has been used in every single console shooter since Halo Combat Evolved back in 2001. It really was the Wild West in terms of game design back then, a time the Nintendo Wii was a significant part of. I want to explore that brief window of time, and more specifically, how the Wii gave us some unique ways of experiencing terror in the comfort of our own homes.
Who wants a new Wii? Huh?
Zombies.
Surprising absolutely no one, developers didn't take long to turn the Wiimote into a gun. And I mean, as child-friendly as the Nintendo brand is, their first console wasn't even 1 year old when we were asked to murder ducks with it. Hell, the very first attachment announced for the Wii was named after a martial arts weapon. Gun violence is a part of Nintendo's DNA, and who would studios like Capcom, Sega, and Visceral Games be had they not honored that legacy? Unlike the awkwardly titled House of the Dead 2 and 3 Return, or any of the Lightgun games you'll find at your nearest arcade, where the majority of the tension is in whichever index finger you choose to repeatedly pull the trigger, House of the Dead Overkill, as well as Resident Evil, The Umbrella, and Darkside Chronicles, opt for a slightly more manageable rhythm of gameplay. Which makes sense. You're not playing on a machine insidiously designed to make you cough up dimes in exchange for more playtime. You pay a single fee for full, unlimited access. That's not to say that you won't experience those genre-typical moments of, well, how the hell was I supposed to dodge that attack? But overall, generous checkpointing and healing items accommodate for any perceived unfairness. Is checkpointing a word? Well, it is now. Actually, hold on. My suspension of disbelief only got me this far.
Cocoto. I got Cocoto. Sounds like a disease, honestly. Here's a video game. We don't need it. What we need is state-of-the-art weaponry. Pew pew.
Why does a game like this come with a fucking Glock? The interesting thing about these Lightgun games isn't the Wiimote itself, though. It's the nunchuck. Not only is it very funny to use a controller combination with the vibe of a rejected Final Fantasy weapon, it gives the player more options than a more traditional Lightgun game ever would. Normally, all of your bodily movement is at the complete mercy of the game, which is why this genre is perhaps more famously referred to as rail shooters. But the Umbrella Chronicles allows you to gently move the camera around with the nunchuck, giving you a little more time to kill off enemies lurking at the edges of the frame. Fittingly, you also flail the nunchuck around to perform close quarters attacks. The late psychology professor, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, used the term flow to describe complete immersion during a task. The term has since been adapted to the medium of video games. And while there are several factors to successfully creating a flow state, most importantly to this topic is what pulls a player out of the illusion of being physically present within a game world. When playing a more traditional video game, especially if you're a seasoned player, it's easy to forget that you're even holding a controller, to the point that it almost feels like an additional limb. You certainly don't have to look at it to know that it's gonna do what you want it to do. Lightgun arcade games, however, have always had a level of separation from the player that other video games don't. After all, you're technically shooting bullets straight through the fourth wall, and holding that plastic gun, seeing it in front of you in your real hand, makes you all the more aware that you're playing pretend. It breaks the illusion, breaks the flow state. Or at least it should. But what differs the Lightgun games of the arcade from those on the Nintendo Wii is that tiny yet pivotal addition of player agency the nunchuck allows for. The only two choices House of the Dead 2 and 3 Return offers you is what route to take first and what zombie to shoot first. In the Umbrella Chronicles, you get to choose how to dispose of your enemies. And it's not just a case of which gun. Dead Space Extraction is especially good in regards to expanding player agency. Both the Wiimote and nunchuck have multiple uses, which require you to actively think about how you're holding each controller. Tilting the Wiimote to the side not only grants access to a weapon's secondary fire, but at certain points has you building makeshift barricades against the murder-hungry necromorphs. Hacking minigames see you moving the nunchuck in alternating patterns, sometimes while fending off hostiles at the same time. Dead Space Extraction doesn't just adapt the Lightgun genre to its new Nintendo-patented controllers, but to the home console experience. The game gives you plenty of time to breathe in between enemy encounters, and efficiently uses that time for storytelling and environmental appreciation. You can scavenge for supplies, read left-behind documents entirely at your own pace, something that definitely wouldn't fly at an arcade with other attendees breathing down your neck. A somewhat immersion-breaking issue that has plagued my personal Lightgun experiences since forever is how you pick up items. In the Umbrella and Darkside Chronicles, you can aim at a health pickup 5 meters away, and it will just magically teleport into your pocket, with no explanation given. Not to mention the hovering green symbols in House of the Dead Overkill that grant you temporary bullet time upon being shot. It's fine. You don't exactly go to an arcade to be immersed in perfect diegesis. But Dead Space Extraction might be the first Lightgun shooter ever to include a believable reason why this magic is possible, by simply including the telekinesis and stasis technologies that were already present in the mainline Dead Space series. There's a satirical VR game for PlayStation 4 called The American Dream, where literally every single action, cooking burgers, cleaning your car, playing catch with your dad, are all performed by shooting a gun. As funny as that absurdity is, that's basically how all Lightgun games work. Your only mode of interaction with the world is through gun violence, which again, is fine for the genre. Dead Space Extraction rejects that idea. The initial appeal of the Wii was that it was going to give you more control over your actions on screen, not the same amount as before. And in that regard, I'd argue that Dead Space Extraction remains a big leap for the Lightgun genre even by modern standards. While the Umbrella Chronicles, and especially Darkside Chronicles, with its camera control being oddly absent, feel like Lightgun shooters that happen to be Resident Evil games, Extraction feels like a Dead Space game that happens to be a Lightgun shooter. It also helps that it doesn't leave you with a cramping trigger finger. There is a new issue that these Lightgun games create, though. Retaining stability and accuracy for longer periods of time require you to hold your little toy gun with both hands. But with one hand already gripping the nunchuck, you're either forced to keep your shooting hand up without the support of your other hand, or you awkwardly try to hold both controllers as tightly together as possible. If you're playing the Umbrella or Darkside Chronicles, you can simply detach the nunchuck, But then you would also have to get rid of your gun attachment in order to reach the face buttons on the Wiimote. At which point, another illusion gets broken. You aren't actually shooting these zombies. You're playing a point-and-click game.
Wow. That's amazing.
¡Detrás de ti, imbécil!
The point-and-click approach works better for the non-Lightgun Wii games. Cursed Mountain, Dead Rising Chop Till You Drop, Fatal Frame 2, and the Wii port of Resident Evil 4 play like your standard third-person shooters, with the main difference being that you aim your weapons with the Wiimote rather than a thumbstick. And since you won't be using a Lightgun peripheral, it will feel more natural to have your controllers resting on your lap, keeping them out of sight. Flow state restored. Kind of. Resident Evil 4 was one of the early adopters of the now dreaded QuickTime event. Even back in the 2005 original, the buttons you were required to press to clear these life-threatening events would frequently appear on screen. Invasive, but ultimately not too distracting. In the Wii version, you'll occasionally see a whole-ass Wiimote being shaken around on screen, asking you to quickly replicate the motion. Chop Till You Drop does the same. In the short moments of panic these QTEs are intended to evoke, it sure is intuitive to simply move your body to clear them. A less experienced, or more easily frightened player might do that anyway, on pure instinct. I just feel like there could have been a more elegant way of asking the player to move the Wiimote than displaying the whole controller on screen in all its white plastic glory. Cursed Mountain solves this problem by instead displaying different patterns, representative of both in-world symbols and specific movements with the Wiimote and nunchuck. Sure, remembering what these patterns are asking you to do in the heat of the moment might not always be easy, but since it's a game where you're playing as an outsider, gradually learning about the mysticism of a different culture, I believe it's somewhat appropriate that you might struggle with interpreting its symbols. All that being said, it doesn't surprise me why some regard the Wii version of Resident Evil 4 as the superior one. The motion controls can make combat encounters feel slightly easier, since you're in more direct control of your aim. But there's something about the target reticle lightly twitching from the tiniest trembles in your hand that makes enemy encounters so much more intimate. It's the difference between hitting a target and a target hitting you. There's no blaming missed shots on a flimsy thumbstick. Your success, or lack thereof, is based purely on your own physical micro-reactions, your bodily strengths and limitations, which is why it's baffling that there's one type of firearm that doesn't utilize the motion controls: the sniper rifles. While zooming in on a target, you have to use the thumbstick on the nunchuck to aim, and it feels awful. Speaking of flimsy thumbsticks, contextually, this might be the shoddiest I have ever used. Works fine as a movement stick, but the only thing it'll help you aim for with any kind of precision is literally anything other than what you're trying to shoot. But whatever. It's not like the sniper is one of the quintessential weapons in the game's third act. If the best version of Resident Evil 4 is the one on the Wii, Chop Till You Drop is perhaps the worst version of Dead Rising. Ironic, given that they look and play so similarly. The difference is that Chop Till You Drop tries and fails to incorporate motion-based melee combat. Again, ironic that the shooting is quick and responsive, whereas performing a melee attack with the Wiimote only registers around a second after you swing. Perhaps a deliberate design choice to give weight to the item you're carrying. But this isn't the only Wii horror game to have you wave controllers around to perform close quarters combat. Yet it's the only one I've played where melee has felt this unreliable. The award for least dependable motion controls I've encountered on the Wii, though, has to go to the remake of Fatal Frame 2. The camera obscura, used to fend off the ghosts of Minikami Village, isn't a gun per se, but it essentially functions like one. At least, it would. Because with the added motion controls, it's more like a tank with the firepower of a handgun. As you enter viewfinder mode, ready to banish any undead spirits, you can only use the Wiimote to look up and down. Well, you kind of look to the sides by tilting the controller one side or the other, but that means that the game will occasionally believe that you want to both look up or down and turn. That is, when it registers the control tilt at all. Your other choice is to use the thumbstick on the nunchuck to move the camera left and right, and use the Wiimote to look up and down, which makes precision aiming awkward as hell. and it's barely helped by the lock-on button, which feels more like a band-aid than anything else. I don't know if my age or excessive drinking have completely butchered my ability to multitask, but I find this control scheme to be among the worst I've experienced in not just a Fatal Frame title, but any horror title, period. And it sure doesn't help that the game slowly morphs into a PowerPoint presentation about capturing ghosts as more and more of them slide into frame. There is horror to be found in limitations. I will defend tank controls until the day I die. One could make the argument that the faulty motion controls of Shop Till You Drop and Fatal Frame 2 add to the horror. I will not be making that argument. Delayed input may work for a standard controller-based game like Elden Ring, where a button press isn't something you do carelessly. It's a commitment. But as mentioned before, the Wii is about providing more control over your actions on screen. Not the same amount as in other console games, and certainly not less. Swinging or tilting your Wiimote and not seeing the movement register until at least a second later, if at all, goes against the entire concept of flow it feels like the console's controls were designed for.
We're gonna draw in all the energy that we can, we're gonna have ghosts invited.
They didn't come to the last party. We saw how that turned out.
Sounds like somebody over here is too scared already.
So using the Wiimote as a gun can be pretty hit or miss. But there are other applications for it. I mean, you're kind of holding it like a flashlight already, so might as well use it as one. I'd go so far and say that the Wiimote works the very best for this purpose. Silent Hill Shattered Memories is a stellar example. A significant chunk of the game is spent on environmental exploration, and with full control over the movement of your flashlight beam, you're both able to and encouraged to examine the world more closely than in previous Silent Hill titles. You don't have to inspect every nook and cranny. It's more curiosity fulfillment than a necessity. But I find it difficult to resist when I'm the one in complete control of the game's focal points, rather than the classically static survival horror camera. It significantly adds to the atmosphere as well, since shedding light on something will also cast a shadow, meaning that you might potentially create the very things that horrify you. Looking around with a flashlight is smooth as butter, though it's a little less smooth using the Wiimote to turn Harry's entire body around, a problem that Shattered Memories easily solves. You see, you aren't actually in any real danger while you're exploring. It's only when the temperature drops, and the walls and buildings around you turn to ice, that you have to start running. During these chase sequences, the environments are often laid out in such a way where you can clearly see potential routes without turning the camera all that much. Like 90 degrees one way or the other at most. If you ever need to turn the camera further to, say, keep track of your pursuers, there's a dedicated button that allows you to look behind you while you're still sprinting forward. In other words, the Wiimote created a limitation, which birthed a gameplay mechanic that only enhanced the tension further. Though it is a little distracting when you're caught by a monster and the game displays what looks like exercise instructions you'd see during a session of Wii Fit. Ju-On the Grudge and Calling also use the Wiimote as a flashlight, but they're played through a first-person perspective. Ju-On is especially interesting since it only requires the Wiimote. The player character is only holding a flashlight, so why should you be holding anything else? This of course means that you have no access to a movement stick, which the game solves by having you essentially drive the player character, like a very slow senior scooter, by holding down the B button on the back of the Wiimote. As awkward as it sounds, it works. The pace of the game is as slow as the movement speed. So even if you're struggling to get around, the game isn't exactly expecting you to haul ass. That is, unless you're starting to run out of batteries, which is the closest the game has to a health mechanic. Ju-On ultimately tries a bit too hard to be scary. Heck, there's even a feature that allows a second player to use an additional Wiimote just to throw a bunch of spooky faces on screen. But I appreciate its simplicity. Because when the game isn't forcing its scares, it actually is pretty damn unnerving. And it accomplishes that with nothing but some mostly empty environments and a flashlight. We are simple creatures, after all. Put yourself in a real dark forest with a real flashlight, and chances are you're gonna end up scared, with or without the presence of an actual threat. Ever since Frictional Games asked us to make our first dark descent into the world of Amnesia, there have been countless indie horror games where it's just you, a singular, portable light source, and a monster out to get you. but so few of them make that light source feel like an actual item in your possession. It's merely a fixture mounted on the camera that is the player character's head. You take it for granted. The Wiimote not only forces you to manually think about your flashlight and where you are pointing it, it immerses you like few other horror games on the Wii can. Not everyone has used a gun, and absolutely no one has ever had to use a gun to shoot a real-life zombie, I hope. But everyone knows what it's like to traverse the dark with a flashlight in their hand. It has me wondering how a game like Amnesia: The Dark Descent would have been improved if it had Wiimote-style motion controls. There are games like Fragile Dreams, Farewell Ruins of the Moon, and Obscure 2 that use the Wiimote as a flashlight and feature combat. And as much as I've come to enjoy using the Wiimote for camera control, I don't think either of their control schemes complement the horror as well as the controls in Shattered Memories, Ju-On, or Calling. Though that's admittedly in part because Fragile Dreams is a PEGI 7 game, a horror experience for the kiddos. Obscure 2 does aim to terrify, and switching between using the Wiimote as a flashlight and a gun works seamlessly. However, it generally plays like a game that just kind of happens to have motion controls slapped onto it, which is exactly what Obscure 2 is. It was released on both the Wii and PlayStation 2. This is true of Shattered Memories as well, though its PS2 version started development after work on the Wii version was already in progress. I'd argue that flashlight-based horror games do the best on the Wii, at least conceptually. But those are not the kinds of games that had me the most interested when going into this project. What I was looking for was the weird shit. The kind of motion control I really wouldn't be able to find on any other platform. The stuff that I would look at and say, that's so Nintendo Wii. Well, ladies, gentlemen, my fellow NBs, it's time we step off into the town of unhinged creativity. Okay, it's not that unhinged, but...
Now, I can sharpen my clapping skills in the privacy of my own home with Brendan Fraser's Wii Clap for Nintendo!
Keep it cool with the unenthusiastic jazz solo clap. Jazz solo clap.
Jazz solo clap.
Don't you find it interesting that Brendan Fraser has been recorded doing a gag with a Nintendo Wii not once, but twice? I mean, 2 isn't exactly a pattern, but I'm wondering how involved Fraser was in that decision. Like, was he actively championing for including the Wii, or... Anyway, there's one feature inside the Wiimote I have not yet mentioned. The speaker. I'm only bringing it up now because there are surprisingly few Wii games that use it to enhance the horror. The best you're gonna get out of a game like House of the Dead Overkill, for example, is a clicking noise whenever you reload. But then there are games like Silent Hill Shattered Memories and Calling, where the devs knew exactly how to tap into the speaker's potential. It's simple, really. The Wiimote is shaped like a flashlight, but it's also kind of shaped like a phone. So in these games, you collect voice recordings and receive phone calls, and you're encouraged to hold up the Wiimote to your ear to listen to them. The sound quality is crunchy, close to unintelligible, adding to the sense that you're communicating with someone, or something, that's not quite right. Not quite of this world, perhaps. That uneasy feeling is heightened by the fact that the voices are reaching out from the screen in front of you and into the palm of your hand. If shooting at your TV with a plastic gun peripheral breaks the fourth wall from your direction, the Wiimote speaker breaks it from the opposite direction. And that feels downright disturbing. It's no wonder why the developers behind Calling in particular chose a cell phone as its most central mechanic, though the game might be a little too eager about it.
God, stop fucking calling! Stop fucking calling!
Fragile Dreams uses the Wiimote speaker as well, though to lackluster results. Here, it's used like a radar that plays a sound more loudly the closer you get to a target, though you can barely trust the information it's giving you. From the moment this mechanic is introduced, it misleads you. Like, here the sound is the loudest right by this little shop, but I was actually supposed to go downstairs and crawl through a hole in the wall. It worked even less reliably during a game of hide and seek with this ghost girl, where I had to listen for her voice and press the A button when standing right in front of her, which took far longer than it probably should have. One game that really surprised me with its Wiimote implementation was Manhunt 2, and it surprised me even before the game had officially begun. You see, unlike the PC and PS2 versions, this one starts with a tutorial for all the different ways you can brutally execute your enemies. Except, you don't actually see any of them. The controls pop up on screen, accompanied by a directional arrow, and then you simply hear the sound of someone getting murdered. I'm not sure what the result would ultimately end up saying about you, but I feel like one could easily construct a litmus test around people's reactions to this tutorial, solely based on the footage on screen, or lack thereof. Do you reckon playing this tutorial would make you feel uncomfortable, make you laugh, or both? For me, this is unironically one of the most memorable moments I've had with Manhunt 2 so far. The suggestion of gruesome murder haunts me way more than whatever edgy imagery the original version of the game could offer me. And it's not just the tutorial. All executions are heavily abstracted by frenetic visual effects and filters. It gives the game a distinct aesthetic identity, and complements the theme of desensitization towards violence that the series is known for. The Wii version of Manhunt 2 frames the taking of a digital life as equivalent to waving a plastic toy around inside an empty void. And yeah, it feels appropriately inconsequential. Yet I can't help but be affected by this tutorial. The acts I can only imagine happening behind the black screen. What horrific instruments of brutality and torture are lining up with the flicks of my innocuous Wiimote and nunchuck. Escape from Bug Island was a Japanese launch title for the Wii, and one could certainly tell that the developers at Spike really wanted to show off what the controls could do, resulting in a control scheme you might not see in any other Wii game, period. You wave the Wiimote to use your melee weapon. You arch it forward to throw rocks to get fruit down from trees. You arch the nunchuck towards you to backstep. You use the Wiimote to look around in first person and navigate the cursor in menus. You swipe the Wiimote to roll to the right, but you swing the nunchuck to roll to the left. And you shake both of them to get rid of bugs crawling on your back. The commitment is admirable. The ambition of creating new and exciting ways to control video games even more so. I found Escape from Bug Island entertaining to play, but not scary. Giant bugs are unnerving, certainly, but nothing about the motion controls made me more or less fearful of them. I suppose the thrill of innovation can distract from the evocation of terror. Which brings us to No, I was done with you! Back in 2024, I made a video chronicling my personal history with the Alone in the Dark games. I fully expected and sincerely hoped that to be the last time I would need to play the 2008 reboot. One of, if not the most catastrophically overambitious horror title of my lifetime. But like Kelly Clarkson, here I am, once again. Because I didn't cover the Wii version of the game. And the Wii version is worse! In some ways. To its credit, the 2008 version of Alone in the Dark is a reasonable fit for the Wii. A game that tried to reinvent the horror game experience, played on hardware that tried to reinvent the home console experience. It's frankly a match made in heaven. So why does playing it make me feel like I'm in hell? For one, it's a close recreation of the PC and Xbox 360 versions, and you can't expect an extravagant cathedral to be built on the same rotten ground where a close to identical cathedral has already crumbled. Its biggest crime, though, apart from Edward Carnby inexplicably not being voiced by the late James McCaffrey, is that the motion controls don't improve the needlessly complicated control scheme of the original versions. It merely replaces them with Wiimote and nunchuck gestures. Jumping feels like crap in the other versions of the game. It feels even worse, and is way more deadly, with input delay as significant as this. It's like the developers at Hydravision knew that to be the case, because you also have the option to simply press the minus button on the Wiimote to jump, a button normally used for menus. Not quite as strange as pushing the print screen button on your keyboard to drop a rope,
but it is validating to see that neither Eden Games nor Hydravision were able to make their own control scheme feel like it made much sense. I'm a fan of what they were going for, on paper. I'm a firm believer that the pursuit of homogenizing control schemes across the whole medium contributes to the death of creativity. Alone in the Dark is the exception to the rule. And as much as I appreciate it molding the person I am today, which I get into in my Alone in the Dark video, it's the one game that, to this day, has me fuming whenever my brain decides to plague me with my painful memories of completing it for the first time. And that didn't change much with the inclusion of motion controls. The one thing that the Wii version of Alone in the Dark does better is what all actually good Wii horror games do better: the flashlight. I switched to and stayed in first-person view as much as I could, just to get to control the movements of the flashlight beam. It was the closest I ever got to actually kind of vibing with the game, especially in the parking garage, where the monsters, or humans as they're laughably called, barely attacked me, for some reason. They just slowly stumbled around, looking at me. It made me think, what if this had been the Alone in the Dark reboot? A first-person game, where your only tool is a flashlight, where your enemy is always present, yet never clear about their intentions. The PC and Xbox 360 versions of Alone in the Dark were already a stark reminder of why less is more. But it wasn't until I played the Wii version that I realized just how much less the game needed in order to live up to its name and legacy as an all-time horror great. Which I suppose also reflects my general feelings on the Nintendo Wii, as a platform for horror games. The Wii is capable of a lot of neat things. I'm intrigued and impressed by several of those things. But it is in the form of something as simple as a light gun or a flashlight that the Wiimote shines the brightest.
We would like to play, yeah.
I've mentioned 17 different horror games in this video, and that doesn't even cover all of the horror games on the Wii. Not all of them are exclusives, most of them aren't, but they at least utilize the motion controls to stand out among other console ports. Compare that to the amount of horror games released on Nintendo's follow-up console, the Wii U, to the games that were made with that system, and more specifically its tablet controller, in mind. There is, Zombie U and, Fatal Frame 5? Granted, that game fits so well on the Wii U, you would almost imagine the console was made for it rather than the other way around, but that number is shockingly low. And unless you count Deadly Premonition 2, which can barely run on the system, or at least it couldn't, and Luigi's Mansion 3, which is quite generous, no horror games were made exclusively for the Nintendo Switch. And just to illustrate how inconsequential the motion controls in Luigi's Mansion 3 are, here's a clip of two players allegedly discovering that the game even has motion controls 8 hours in! Not even the Switch version of Resident Evil 4 has motion controls, despite the system featuring Wii-like Joy-Cons and gyro aiming. If you want a new experience comparable with the Nintendo Wii, you have to get your hands on a VR headset, which basically solves the issue of breaking your flow by pulling you straight through the fourth wall. It causes a different issue though. If you're going with an older VR headset, like the PSVR, you'll have the discomfort of dealing with way more cables than you will ever want to. And if you're going with a newer model, you're gonna have to start skipping breakfast for a while. And lunch. And dinner. And everything else you enjoy in life. Even with the flaws of its games, and the flaws of the system itself, the Nintendo Wii offers motion-controlled gaming like no other system did before or after. It's intricate, yet simplistic. All you need is a camera, a controller, and you're ready to go. Actually, since the Wiimote reacts to infrared light, you could literally replace the camera with lit candles. The Wii was the video game novelty back in 2006. It was the one console I would find in the home of almost everybody I would ever visit. While not as prevalent, I'd say that the Wii feels just as much like a novelty 20 years later. I don't get to see nor play games like this anymore. Especially not horror games. And it saddens me that it was only VR developers who took any kind of lessons at all from what the Wii did so well for this particular genre. In a just world, I would be able to play Resident Evil 9 with motion controls, without a month's salary's worth of headgear attached to my face. I would be going back, again and again, to immerse myself with free aiming that forever fading dynamo flashlight in Amnesia: The Bunker. I'm perfectly satisfied with the current state of the horror game landscape, but I feel like I would have been even happier if the Wii had left a more lasting mark. But that's the thing about wishing for things to be like they used to, right? When the future disappoints you, there's nothing stopping you from going back to the classics.
Thank you so much for watching. If you wish for more videos like this to be released into the world, consider supporting this channel over on Patreon. I want to try and make a proper living off the work I do here. And with your help, that could become a reality someday. Some of the people who are currently contributing to that dream are 12p, Anaday, Callum Wally, Chromatophorium, Eben Phantom, Emmeline, Eric Hamilton Schneider, Evil A. Chance, Håvard Krugerud, Icarus Harker, Jesse Earl, Kalis, Labis, Losty, Nicole, Rowan Woodcock, Sable Cowl, Setsard, TB Skyen, The Fluff, The Sphere Hunter, Vinders, and Wine Kasra. I also want to thank Hot Cider for the thumbnail, Hamish of the YouTube channel Writing on Games for editing the script, Lauftre for the makeup, and Sebastian for the additional camera work. Now, if you excuse me, I'm gonna be busy playing Resident Evil Requiem for my next project. Or if you're watching this video in like 2036, well, I'm either fighting in the corporate wars, or I'm dead. I know what you've all been waiting for. You want to know about the kids game with the Glock. This is Cocoto Magic Circus, or a series of cheap shooting-based party games where the goal is not to get bored enough by the repetition to turn the game off before the end credits. Well, actually, you choose one of these 4 colorful imps to save a fairy from an evil circus clown who turns out to be a god-looking genie in a bottle. And no matter which character you choose at the start, the fairy will always reward the red imp with a kiss. She doesn't owe you romance. You can't just win her heart over with gun violence. She already has a partner. But a part of you is still disappointed, aren't you? And what does that say about you? Perhaps you're a little possessive. Perhaps you believe yourself to be the main character of not just your own life, but everyone else's. Think about that. Think about that.
Think about that. Think about that.